Slideshow, text, continuous improvisation and ITSM. Jason
All
Erdman.
right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Continuous Improvisation, Adapting Process, Governance, and Communication in ITSM. Our presenter today is Lindsay Bolin, who is the lead ITSM engineer at the Department of Informatics and Information Technology in the School of Medicine and Public Health. Lindsay, welcome and thank you.
Lindsay Bolin.
Thank you very much, Jason. So yeah, continuous improvisation in ITSM. Let me start by saying I have no idea what I'm talking about. But before you all start clicking that leave the meeting button, let me give an explanation. I don't consider myself to be an expert in anything, not organizational change, not project management, not even ITSM. I know what I don't know, and I don't know everything. But the project I'm going to talk about today taught me that I have pretty good instincts and that not knowing is just a new opportunity to learn. What I'm about to share is not a polished success story by any means. It's a story about adapting in real time, about making decisions without perfect information, and about learning that improvisation isn't chaos, it's a skill.
She changes the slide.
Ugh, I forgot to fix the animation, sorry.
Text, background.
So let's start with some context. This wasn't a run-of-the-mill ITSM implementation. It was happening while the organization was still knitting itself together. While the people who would be working in the platform were still figuring out what that work would actually be.
Department of Informatics and IT.
When I first started at School of Medicine and Public Health, IT support was distributed and department-based. Right around 20 different teams, all of us with different tools, different processes, and different levels of maturity. Some teams had a ton of people, depth and specialization, and some teams were just one guy trying to juggle everything at once. There was no standard service catalog across the whole school. There were no consistent workflows and no shared approach to support. Some of us had ITSM systems in place. Some of us had asset management in software, in Excel spreadsheets, and then some of us just had a single shared email and treated each message thread as close to a ticket as we could. When COVID came, it exposed some pretty serious security gaps, significant technical debt, and a real lack of equity in support and resource access for our faculty, staff, and students. There were a lot of discussions on what to do. We had a serious need to cut cost without sacrificing support, and eventually a decision was made to consolidate. We joined together all 20 teams into what became 9 IT service lines, all kind of grouped around specific functional areas like user support services, cybersecurity, enterprise application solutions, and quite a few more. Unifying quote unquote ticketing was seen as an early win. We had several different subscriptions that we were paying for that we didn't want to pay for anymore. And that's really where the improvisation starts. We didn't have shared processes yet. We didn't have clear ownership of an ITSM platform, and we didn't even fully understand what work looked like across the service lines. So we weren't implementing ITSM into a system. We were implementing it into uncertainty.
Implementation project timeline.
The end goal was a one-stop shop for IT services. But we didn't really know what that meant or what it looked like. From start to end, the implementation project took just about a year and a half, with multiple work streams and a series of phased go-live launches. We started with a project staff of 5 and ended around 12 people. After a discovery and proposal process, Atlassian Cloud was selected as our ITSM platform, which worked out great for me since I already had 4 years of running Atlassian Cloud at the Department of Family Medicine and Community Health. We were able, thankfully, to hire consultants who were well-versed in Atlassian to give me help with the designing, building, and assembling training resources. And pretty much as soon as possible, we started discovery. I didn't have any training at all in requirements gathering. If any of you saw my talk last year, my background is in social work. So I'm good at having conversations with people, but I didn't really know all of the ins and outs of getting the technical information that I needed, and that more importantly, that other people needed. I was used to working alone, so my conversational therapeutic kind of style worked great for me. I didn't really know how to explain what I did to bring other people in. So I tried to start as simple as possible. There were two questions that I asked each of the service line directors. What do you do, and who do you do it for? We structured the build in phases to keep the work manageable and scalable as more staff started to become available to join the team. As you can see, our first go live was in May 2025, more than a year after the platform was selected. And over the summer, there were continuous more go lives until the very final one, which was in December of 2025. So just barely 6 months ago. It all looks so neat in a simple graphic like this, but the reality felt very different. Staffing changed midstream. Our requirements were constantly evolving, and our priorities shifted as the org change settled in some places and then expanded in others. Improvisation here meant that we kept moving forward, even when the destination wasn't fully defined.
Website.
And this is our end product, SMPH IT Navigator. I did not get to pick the name, just FYI. A shared work platform for all IT support, project management, knowledge bases, documentation, and asset management. I'm proud of it. I'm very proud of everything that the team accomplished, but pride does not prevent me from acknowledging the serious challenges that we faced. There were problems, there were mistakes. This wasn't built in a straight line, and it could only have been built through iteration and adjustment.
Slide. Text. Challenges and adaptations.
So let's talk about where improvisation really mattered, the challenges.
Major challenges.
When we started doing our lessons learned reviews as each work stream closed, we started to see patterns emerge. Almost everything that we struggled with could be grouped into 4 themes: confusion, overwhelm, passivity, and disconnect. And these weren't isolated issues. They were overlapping, reinforcing each other, and changing over time. And that's where continuous improvisation comes in. We weren't solving one problem at a time. We were constantly adjusting across all 4. So I'm going to walk through each one, not just what happened, but how we adapted in real time.
Confusion. Wait, what are we doing?
I cannot tell you how many times I heard this phrase or even said it myself, with increasingly colorful variations as the weeks dragged on. So many times. What is this? What are we doing? And it wasn't because we weren't planning. It's because the organization itself was still changing underneath us. At that time, service lines were still forming. The consolidation started in 2023, but staff didn't actually begin to move into service lines until the spring of 2024, right before the implementation project started. So we didn't know who owned what process, and despite having service lines, it hadn't actually been agreed on what services we were even going to offer. There was no service catalog, there were no shared processes, and there was no consistent structure. And on top of that, there were disagreements about platform ownership. I was working in the enterprise applications and solutions service line. I was the recognized expert, even though I still don't think I am, on Atlassian Cloud. So I was put in charge as the lead technologist. But there were a couple of other people in the department who had some knowledge of Atlassian and the Jira platform. They were not working in enterprise applications. So some of their teams expected to be able to build things independently, and other teams were expecting centralized control under enterprise applications. It was certainly what we were expecting. So we weren't just implementing ITSM. We were trying to define the organization while building the system for it. Improvisation here meant making decisions without full authority and moving forward anyway.
Clearing confusion.
So how do you move forward when nothing is fully defined? You create structure where you can. First, project defined our own scope. What can we do, meaning what's possible in the platform and what matches the existing skill set? What can't we do, meaning what's not possible in the platform or prohibited by compliance requirements, and what is maybe a little beyond the existing skill set? And what will we do right now? It's possible in the platform, and it's a reasonable workload. That will-do list became critical. It balanced stakeholder expectations with what was realistically achievable. Second, we created a short-term strategy, not a 5-year mission, vision, values thing, just enough direction to guide the next few months. We focused on clean and simple, a minimum viable product, broad use, and high impact. Because improvisation doesn't mean no plan, it means planning at the right level of certainty. And third, governance. We stood up a formal governance board pretty early, which gave us a place to resolve conflicts about ownership and process, a way to enforce decisions and policies, and most importantly, support for the project team to meet our goal of a platform that would serve everyone's needs, if not all of their preferences. The improvisation takeaway here is you don't have to wait for clarity from above. You build just enough structure to keep moving.
Overwhelm. We're doing too much.
The second challenge was overwhelm. At one point, I was the only engineer on the project. I was handling discovery, design, admin setup, while also trying to find staff to help me with all of that. Some of you guys may remember, was it January of 2025? Whole bunch of Atlassian accounts got deactivated. That was me. I'm still very sorry about that. Part of the reason that it happened is because I was overwhelmed. I was by myself and I was doing too much. When we did manage to find people to add to the project team, they were new to Atlassian and to process design, and they were often inconsistently available because they were still supporting their old roles. And there was just no time for me to sit down and directly train anybody. Then you add in hard deadlines from those upcoming legacy subscription renewals that we absolutely could not pay. Multiple major projects across all of the other IT service lines, and then the position cap, which prevented us from hiring new staff. And the result was we're doing too much. The key thing here is this was not a problem that we could eliminate. It was a constraint that we had to work within. Improvisation wasn't optional. It was survival.
Easing overwhelm.
So instead of trying to remove the overload, we adjusted around it. First, we leaned heavily on existing resources. We were lucky. Atlassian provides a ton of learning resources for free, including documentation, community knowledge, and consultants, because stopping to figure out everything ourselves wasn't an option. Second, we phased access to the platform. Because of the size of this implementation, we didn't want to open the doors immediately to everyone and then get crushed in the mob. So we controlled entry points. We started by giving stakeholders access to a sandbox where they could learn the platform while we were still designing and building their spaces. Then we picked a single app to open for everyone, the documentation app Confluence, which needs very little work from admins, and let IT staff familiarize themselves with navigating the platform. And third, and this was the hardest, we set honest expectations. We had to be honest, realistic, and firm with ourselves and the people we were working with about our limitations, about what was possible to do within the timeline and scope of the project, and about starting simple and introducing complexity over time. It's just not possible to create the perfect product in the first go-round. Speed and complexity are impressive to customers, but massively detrimental to people as staff who need to eat and sleep and not think about work 24/7. At the start of the project, I was struggling with the workload. I was lucky to have a very supportive supervisor and director who listened when I told them that I needed help. Everybody has limitations, and they understood that meant we may need to scale back the scope of the work or reevaluated what needs to be done immediately and what could wait. Where we couldn't reduce complexity, we could at least control exposure to it.
Passivity. Can Jira tell us what to do?
The third challenge was passivity. And it showed up as a simple question. Can't Jira just tell us what to do? Underneath that are two things. First, an expectation that the platform or the engineers would define services for the teams. And second, a tendency to get distracted by shiny features like automation, customization. Oh, what if we could do this? Teams were skipping past the basics. They didn't have their defined processes, they didn't know their operational ownership, and they were just jumping straight to the ideal future state. But it wasn't laziness on their part, it was exhaustion. They were working just as hard as we were on just as many complex projects. But it still created risk. Tools don't replace decisions. So we had to reset the approach. First, letting process dictate configuration. We stopped talking about the tool at all during design conversations. Instead, we asked what actually happens today, who does it, and why does it exist? Because every service, every request existed before a ticket ever existed to track it. Second, we aligned our work to maturity. Some teams were ready for very complex things, while others were still kind of laying that basic foundation. So we adjusted. Where processes belong to an individual team, we could maybe do a little bit more complex, but where it crossed teams, we matched that complexity to whichever team had the least maturity. And third, assigning operational ownership. No more shared responsibility, no more, well, somebody will figure out how to do it. Every process needed a clear owner, needed documentation, and needed accountability. Improvisation here means resisting the urge to overbuild and grounding everything in reality.
Disconnect. That's not what I heard.
The fourth challenge was disconnect, and this one amplified everything else. Our communication problems looked like this. A formal comms plan came late, almost a year into the project, simply because we didn't know that we had a communications resource to reach out to. Decisions happened inside conversations. We had a governance board, but individual directors and teams would approach members of the governance board, and things that they were told didn't always match the things that we'd been told. There was no shared forum between the project team and all of the directors. We interacted one-on-one, but we didn't have a place where we could clarify some of these conflicting decisions. So we'd hear, that's not what I heard. And the impact was real. We had conflicting expectations, rework, and frustration across project teams and service lines. In some cases, decisions were actually made and approved, and the project team didn't know about them until it was brought up in a status meeting. This is where improvisation becomes reactive, which is exactly what you want to avoid.
Bridging disconnect.
So we made communication intentional. First, we communicated everywhere we could find, through meetings, through an intranet page, through status updates. We did town halls, department roadshows, because people absorb information differently and at different times. Second, we verified everything we could in writing. Side conversations were not enough anymore. Decisions had to be recorded, shared, and transparent. And third, we created the forums that we needed to bring directors and engineers together. Regular, structured time, not just these one-on-one conversations, because alignment doesn't happen in fragments. Communication isn't just sharing information, it's actively reducing misalignment.
Continuing the improv.
Key realization from all of this was that improvisation doesn't stop at go live, it becomes how you operate.
Improvements. Post-implementation. A list.
Since implementation, we've actually made a couple of more improvements. The first thing was we started holding monthly ITSM operations meetings. Being in kind of a unique position of managing this platform on which all of the department work was happening, I was seeing where there were communication gaps, where there were frustrations building, where there was conflict, sometimes not even related to the platform itself. And I knew we all needed a place to talk it out. So once a month we meet, I share important app updates, answer questions directly, and resolve these conflicts. The next thing we did was formalizing change management for the platform. I had some documentation, some guidance templates for my staff, but they needed a lot of refinement. We have tickets now for adapting our ticketing system. We've also spent a lot of time automating our administration, our access management, counting up how many licenses we have left for our apps, which has helped ease that burden quite a lot. We don't need to spend as much time focusing on maintenance and can focus more on the support and the build. We're also starting to gradually expand to use more and more of the features that our platform offers. There was quite a lot of interest in some of the more complex features during the original project, but that was something where we just to say, we do not have time to do this. We need to be focusing on what we can get done. And you might notice the pattern here. These are small, they're intentional, and they're iterative. That's continuous improvisation in practice.
Slide, text, takeaways, a list.
So I'll leave you with a few key ideas. Clarity before configuration. If you don't understand the work, tools are not going to fix them. They expose the problems. They do not solve them. ITSM is a people and process change. You need to invest as much in governance and in communication as you do in the actual setup of it. You also need to be planning beyond implementation. Go live implementation is temporary. Operations are forever. Orphaned processes will become your problem. And if everybody owns a process, then nobody owns the process. And most importantly, embrace improvisation, not as chaos, but as a disciplined way of adapting. Because maturity doesn't come from big, perfect launches. It comes from small, continuous improvements over time.
Text, questions?
And that's it. Anybody's got any questions, I'm happy to take them and also drink some water.
Jason Erdman.
Thank you, Lindsay. Please put your hand up if you have any questions for her, or you can type them in chat and we'll read them all for you. We have about 7 minutes for questions.
Lindsay Bolin.
I had to find the show meeting button again so I can actually see faces. Yeah, focusing on process as opposed to focusing on the tool. I think this is going to come up a lot more. It's actually come up quite a few times since the implementation. AI is everybody's favorite thing to go running to. I've had a couple of instances where people have gone to Microsoft Copilot and asked them to create Atlassian configurations. First of all, Copilot doesn't actually know what it's doing, so the things that they were bringing me were not correct. I had to fix them anyway. But also, the underlying process just wasn't there. They didn't have documentation. If the system went down and didn't come back up for 2 weeks, they wouldn't have any idea what to do. They literally did not have a step-by-step, this is the work that it takes to complete this task. And I think the other part is that we weren't considering all of the work that happens outside of the platform. Not everything that you do to complete a process shows up in the ticket. And you see that a lot in discussions of SLAs and metrics. AI can give you kind of an average of best practice, but it is not sitting in your office. It doesn't know that the reason it takes you 3 hours to image one computer is the inventory room is a 20-minute walk away. And also, Kevin is obsessed with MLB and plays every single game at full volume on his laptop while you're sitting there trying to remember what command line you need to use to set up BitLocker. The human experience is very important. Sketch out how you stood up governance. Very sloppily. Like I said before, I mostly worked alone on the platform when I was at Family Medicine, and I had full trust of my director and supervisor. So every once in a while, I would bring them something that I felt needed their attention, but they kind of trusted me to make decisions. I didn't really have that in the new consolidated department, mostly because I didn't know the leadership and they didn't know me. We had never worked together before. So as we were coming up against some of these problems, mostly related to like the platform ownership question, I brought up to the project team, we kind of need a higher authority to say that what we're doing is sanctioned. So we started out very small. It was just the senior IT directors, my director, my supervisor, and myself. And I think having a technologist on a governance board, especially if it's governance for a particular app or platform, is invaluable. I have the technical depth of knowledge to fully inform decisions that they're making. I can put together reports and analysis so they don't have to spend a bunch of time trying to look up information about compliance, about features. I can do that and bring it to them. We still don't have a formalized governance charter. I would really like to put that in place. And now that we're through implementation, I would actually like to expand the governance board. It would be nice if we could have kind of a rotating seat for other service line directors. There's too many of them, I think, for it to be a very effective governance meetings if they're all in there at the same time. But we're all working on this platform, and they deserve to have a voice in the decisions, the policy, and the major changes. I certainly want to hear from them. If my leadership doesn't, I don't know, but I'm the one running the platform, so I care a lot about the individuals who are actually using it. Yes, Mary Beth, communication with everyone is key to fix a lot of the issues. I think that's one of my biggest regrets from this project is that I really did want to be more visible to the entire department. This was a huge change. This was not just people moving into new teams, it was people having to use new tools, having to take on new services, losing some services that they used to do all the time. And there was a lot of fear around that change. I wanted to be available. I wanted to have people feel comfortable coming up to me, asking me questions directly, but I wasn't able to do that. Part of it is just because I was really overwhelmed with the work, and part of it was because we started so late.
Jason Erdman.
All right. So, Lindsay, thank you very much for this presentation, and to the almost 60 people that joined us. Thank you for spending your time with us for the last half hour. If you have further questions for Lindsay, you can find her contact information on our conference webpage. It is now time for our lunch break. The next session will start up at 12:20. Thank you, everybody.
Lindsay Bolin.
Thanks.